few weeks ago, I posted this video to my Instagram. Doing a lot of these remakes for fun just because I think it's a great creative exercise to genre bend stuff. But I had a lot of people asking me how I was able to recreate this 1975 black and white album sound. And today I'm going to show you how I go about replicating that album. But first, so you're an indie artist and you're producing your own music, but it feels like it's just not quite there. Like there's a little 20% that's missing, but you've reached the end of your production knowledge and YouTube tutorials are not helping. Everybody says it'll sound better after the mix and master, but you've done that before and you've ended up just getting a really polished version of a demo that you weren't really happy with. Recently, I've started offering post-production projects where instead of me producing your song from scratch, we actually use the production that you've built up on your own for a majority of the track, where we add all the spice and the little details and vocal production to bring it up to 100%. If that at all sounds like you or you'd be interested in something like that, go to the link in the description. You can book a consultation call with me and we can see if it would be a good move for you and your song. Also, as you can see, as we're going through this session, I am now back on Mac. So if any of you guys would like a video about why I swapped back over from PC to Mac, put that down in the comments and maybe I'll make a video on it. I'll turn off all the effects sends for this video because I want you guys to be able to hear the soloed tracks. And then afterwards, we'll go through the effects sends. But first, we're going to look at these guitars. I really wanted to make something that sounded like Robbers, this sort of plucky rhythmic thing that was different from the traditional like 1975 go up high on the neck and play the pentatonic major scale. I grabbed my Strat, so I got some lower chord voicings going in E major with this plucky guitar part, and when I double tracked it, it sounds like this. Nothing really fancy going on, just this Andy in a bottle preset. So it sounds kind of clean, but it's kind of a light, crunchy tone with a bit of chorus on it. And then double tracking it just makes it feel super wide. The next guitar layer I wanted to add was something that was gonna drone on a little bit. Less of a lead guitar part and more of something that's gonna add this ambience to get this sort of black and white aesthetic that makes it feel like this oppressive, like movie. Like I pictured the music video for Chocolate when I'm making stuff like this because it's so like dingy and dirty. So I wrote this guitar part. Just a super long ambient tail using the exact same preset, but I'm blending it with some ROM reverb to really make it feel like it's this big cavernous vibe. And since this part is really verby and high up on the neck and the other parts are lower on the neck, it almost has this echoey octave vibe for the lower guitar part. Here they are together. Just with those three guitar layers, we already have the vibe for the record that we want. Then since I was going off of that Robbers vibe, I figured I might as well throw in like a really high lead guitar part. Something really gritty, dark, and distorted to the point where the distortion of it almost balances out how clean the other guitars are. So I made this, which I got using this tone that I made specifically to replicate that Robbers guitar sound. By the way, this is actually a free download in my Gumroad. You can get it in the description. But you hear what I'm talking about. It instantly adds this grit and body to it, even though it's a really high part. Like here's what it sounds like going into it. You also hear that I'm going da-da, 1, 2, 3, 4. Like it's not hitting directly on the downbeat. It's going a little before that. That's a little bit of a harken back to the Robbers lead that goes da-da-da-da. Like you almost use the lead guitar as a lead in to the downbeat of the chorus. Now that we've gone through all the guitar layers, let's look at the bass. And I knew that for this track, I wanted something that was big and massive sounding, but also had a little bit of mid-range to it because I find that basses in this style, everybody immediately goes for like the biggest, fattest low end, but then they neglect the low mid-range, which is kind of what makes a bass have its punch. So I used this almost electric bass preset inside of Anna 2, and it sounds like this. Now you can see there's actually 2 tracks, and that's because I have a high octave and a low octave put into a bus together to get that combined bass sound that I'm looking for. And the reason that I do that is because if I solo this low bass here, which is normally what people would be adding, it sounds really good. It has the low end that I'm looking for, and I want that low end to be clean. The problem is, in the mix, if I just have that low octave, you're not really going to hear the bass as much. You're going to feel it because it's in that low register, but you're not actually going to like hear it. And so to make sure that you can hear the bass, I have the exact same patch transposed in octave up, and I've EQ'd it a little bit differently. So that sounds like this. And the reason I have it on a separate track is because now I can actually blend in exactly how much nasaliness I want to have in this bass as a whole. So if I bring it all the way down and then slowly blend it in, you can hear the bass slowly becomes more audible. And that's really important in the context of these guitars. So if I lower this high octave, you can hear the bass kind of goes away. But if I bring back in that high octave slowly, you can actually hear the bass now. Now let's look at the drums. So I have 2 drum sets actually. I have this one in the intro that sounds like this. When I turn on the sends at the end, you'll hear that these guys open up like crazy. The reason that I add these samples specifically is because they remind me of the Roland SPD, which is a drum pad that you see George from the 1975 using a lot on that first record. I think he still uses it, but with this record specifically, there was just so much like 808 drum beat stuff happening, and these guys run into a pretty massive gated reverb that you'll see later, and they just make it sound massive. But because that reverb has to take on a lot of that ambient space, the actual sounds themselves can be pretty small and tight. Then we can look at the other drum kit, which I wanted to be like big and massive and borderline the punchiest element in the whole song. These drums need to feel like the end of the world, basically. And you can see that there's very consistent elements like this kick and this snare hit. And then because I've played those parts so simply, all of the other parts like the toms or the hi-hat fills, they have room to breathe. And that's kind of the give and take when you're arranging drum parts, is if something is going to be complex somewhere, there needs to be simplicity somewhere else to keep things rooted. In case you're wondering, I am using the Luke Holland kit from Mixwave. But then the problem with just using a drum kit is you can hear I'm playing a pretty sparse beat, which is what I feel like they would be playing for a song like this. But there's a lot of rhythmic detail that's not really being filled out right now. So to combat that, I have this percussion loop. It sounds like this. Just a tambourine, nothing crazy, but you can hear if we go from this SPD kit into this main kit, it moves up the energy a little bit, but it could move up a little bit more. So when we add this tambourine with it, you can tell it just makes the whole track feel a little bit more lively, because rhythmically it's doing something that nothing else is doing, which is these fast 16th notes. And all of that is great, but I do feel like there should be a big punch when it goes to the actual drop. So I have this white noise crash called Clap Impact. I use it all the time in my videos, and this just adds a little bit of like an actual like high air punch when we go to the chorus. Now that drop into the heavy drums feels like it's earned. It feels like it's deserved. The last element we're going to look at are these synth pads, which I am constantly using Junos way too much in my tracks because they are this vintage synth that has a lot of aesthetic to it. Like a lot of 80s tracks just use a Juno, but it's also just such a great, like, versatile synth that has so much roundness to it. Like you can do it to fill out a lot of mid-range in a song, and you can take a track that feels pretty sparse production wise and you can just play chords on a Juno, slightly bring it underneath it, and now it feels like this ghost chord is coming out of nowhere and it just makes the song feel more full. So of course I added one and it sounds like this. You can just hear rich, warm, a lot of body and low mids, which in a track like this where we have a lot of high guitars and then a bass, there's a lot of room for some low mids. And then one of my favorite elements from this era of 1975 are the ARPs. There's just some great sound design stuff that's always happening on the ARP synths. I find that something a little bit brassy tends to cut through the mix a little bit more. So I'm using a little bit of BA1 with Ableton's arpeggiator and then a little bit of auto pan for some space. Now it feels like this ARP is like dancing around your head, which again, balance. Nothing else is really dancing around your head like this, so it has a lot of room. And now I'm gonna show you all the elements that we have so far right now with no reverb, no effect sends on them at all. Now I'll turn on the send effects and we'll walk through them one at a time. The first one that I have up here is this gated reverb, which sounds like this. My first reverb is almost always in a band context, something that I'm trying to use to glue all of these individual elements together. It's really easy for stuff produced in a DAW to feel like a bunch of individual tracks that are unrelated. But when you blend them all into the same reverb that's dialed in, you can really help gel them together and make them feel like they're all in the same place, or this is a venue that they're all playing at the same time. The next send effect that I have is this ROM reverb. Which you can hear, there's only like a couple of elements going to it. There's that big clap and then a little bit of that ARP. When you go to using a really big reverb, it's important to not throw everything in it because the reverb is going to be extending out everything that you throw into it. So if you're extending out everything, that can be a quick way to make a mix very muddy, is to throw everything into this big ambient reverb. The next effect I'm using is this ping pong delay. You can hear I'm mainly using it on the guitars just to give them a little bit of rhythmic variation, but I'm also using it on that lead guitar to give it a bunch of width and space. I'm going to turn on the Sabrina Carpenter vocal real quick. On her vocal chain, I am using a bit of this duct reverb. So this is just a delay with this ducking feature turned on, which means whenever audio is going into it, the delay output kind of dips down a bit. And then when there's no more audio coming in, it stops ducking and it brings it back up, which can be a way to get a very busy sounding delay that also is like clean because it will duck down whenever that source is going into it. I use this for vocals all the time. And then you cannot have this record era without a little bit of slap. It's just a super fast delay, not a lot of feedback, and it just gives it this like vintage vibe. Slapback delay is this older effect, so anything that you throw a slapback on, it's gonna have this sort of like twanginess to it. So real quick, without getting a copyright strike, I'm gonna play a little bit of Sabrina Carpenter's vocal just so you can hear all of her effects. Put your back together, and if that's true. Okay, now that we have everything, I will show you guys what the track sounds like from the start. And yeah, that's what the track sounds like. If you enjoy videos like this, please hit subscribe and like. Also, like I said, I have a bunch of free downloads on my Gumroad, which is in the description below. And yeah, I hope you guys have a great week.